All right, welcome to the Contractor Commute. My name is Drew, here with Ben Walsh, and today we're talking about what does it take to build a successful construction business.
It's sort of like, what is the meaning to life?
I know, but so we got that question. We're like, well, you could talk for a long time on that. So we're going to get into it today. It certainly won't be an exhaustive list. We're not going to give you an MBA in 25 minutes, but we'll give you some principles and some things to think about as we go. So before we get started, though, we did get a message from one of our followers. Easton sent us in a question. So Easton, thanks for listening. But he said, hey, just started listening to your podcast. Love it already. You've got a request. I think it's important to spread knowledge as you guys are doing. One of the best ways to gain knowledge is reading. I'm looking for some book recommendations. So think about that one for Ben, and at the end we'll get your book recommendations for Easton. So Easton, thanks for listening. But let's get in. So what does it take to build a successful construction business? Where would you start on that one?
Well, let's define success, number one. Because what might be great for one guy is not necessarily where another guy wants to roll with this. I think a great example of that is we have a very successful contractor. You just had an interview last week with Dan Parrish, and huge business, successful, huge projects, trim carpenter, right? I mean, that's what they got. That's what they do.
Yep.
And then I've got another friend, trim carpenter as well. He's a one-man show, just crushes it, does an amazing job, but he doesn't have any ambitions to scale beyond himself.
Yeah.
He loves it that way. He gets in, get out, makes great money doing it. If he wants to take a month off, he doesn't have to keep any employees busy. He doesn't have a complex business outside of just doing great work. His reputation's fantastic. And so success, I think both these guys are successful.
Right.
But it looks different.
Totally. And I think like talking to Dan Parrish, and if you guys haven't listened to that one yet, he's the CEO and owner of Millworks by Design out in California. And he does incredible work, but he has a team of over 100 employees. He's got 68 carpenters on staff that work for him. But when you talk to him, he said, hey, I always wanted to be a CEO. Like I wanted to run a big company from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important for him, like if that's what's in your head and heart to do, go do it. But if you're Chris, he would be miserable doing what Dan is doing, and Dan would be miserable doing what Chris is doing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a great point. Take some time to think, what is my definition of success? Mm-hmm. And I would also say be comfortable and okay if your definition is different than everybody else's.
That's so true.
Because often, they say comparison is the thief of joy. Well, if I let someone else define success for me, I might climb that ladder and realize I'm leaned up against the wrong wall. And I think you see that quite a bit just in business and in life is knowing what it is you're trying to accomplish. So I think through those two guys and just the example, time and money are the two currencies you have. Some people want more money, some people want more time, and everybody wants, more of both. It's just hard to get. But, different seasons in life too, right? I mean, you might have more time when you're younger, but as you have kids, you might want to value time at home more. So figuring out how you define that and then create a life that helps you get that definition of success.
And the other element of success is sometimes we can push so hard to be successful that we sacrifice true success. We sacrifice families, health, friendships, because we're pushing our businesses too hard.
Yeah.
And so success might be very, very hollow if we lose our family and our health and friends and life outside of work just because we wanted to have a successful business.
Right.
So having success in life and success in a business, I think they run parallel. You don't have one without the other. Yeah,
I think it's a holistic picture that you're trying to build. Yeah. And obviously your business is a vehicle for how you achieve the things in life that you want to achieve. And so I think that's why most guys are in it. They're like, hey, I want to provide, I want to build a life for myself, my family. So if we look at once you define that, let's you
look at Tiger Woods as an example of somebody that was very, very successful and his personal life is falling apart and his success on the golf what is it? Golf, the
course.
links, the course,
the golf fields.
Clearly not a golfer. Well, what do we do on a golf thing? Oh, yes, a golf course. Thank you, Drew. But the two kind of were tied together in some respects.
Yeah. Right. And I think it's there's all those stories, right, where it's like they achieved one level of it, but lost in the big picture. And so
we don't want to be in that category.
Right. Yeah.
So successful, but a complete disaster. One of the things that really, really matter.
So if we look at once you've defined that, you know what it is, and it's okay, now we're going to build a construction business to help paint that picture and build that version of success for ourselves, whether that's building a massive team or being a really successful one-man show. Let's talk through what are some of the core elements. So we talked about a few things As we were prepping for this, we talked about passion, people, skills, practical how-tos. So we're gonna touch on all of those. But we thought it was appropriate to start off with just passion and grit, because that is a necessary thing that you got to take inventory of before you take step one.
Mm-hmm. We can both relate to moments when we wanted to quit in business, where the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And if the passion wasn't there in a sort of fundamental sense, and we didn't have the belief that this was going to work, we wouldn't have stuck with it.
Right.
Steve Jobs said he's convinced that half of what separates successful entrepreneurs from the non-successful ones is pure perseverance. Unless you have a lot of passion about this, you're not going to want to survive, or you're not going to survive. You're going to give up. So you've got an idea or a problem or a wrong that you want to right, and you're passionate about it. Otherwise, you're not going to have the perseverance to stick through it.
Yeah.
And I think that is fundamental.
Yeah.
Because it's not always going to be easy, and learning is painful.
Mm-hmm.
So many lessons I've had to learn. I'd do it over again in a heartbeat, but at that time. But I don't want to do it twice.
Right.
They were painful things to learn.
Yeah. I think it's if you don't have that definition of success and you don't have a big vision, you don't know what the finish line looks like, or what the top of the mountain is that you're climbing. The journey's hard. It's very difficult and very challenging. So having, I think you clarify what that world looks like, and then you got to drive up, make sure you've got the passion and grit to power through the hard days and the hard weeks on your way to getting there. But often, if you haven't taken that first step, which is defining what the top of the mountain looks like for you, then you're going to definitely give up, because you don't even know where you're going. When you define that, and then you get some, the passion and the perseverance and the grit to stick through it.
Yeah. And do you think that even influences how we make decisions too? Because, I mean, if you know where you're going, you're going to make smarter decisions, because well, this doesn't align. I mean, if you're faced with a decision and it doesn't align with the bigger picture, of where you're going, you can say no to it, or do something. You can pivot, you can change, as opposed to just being lost in a cycle of just being bewildered of like, well, it's just one foot in front of the other. I got to pay the bills, and it's just an endless cycle of just must have instead of purposefully wanting to.
And how many guys like that are just kind of like sort of just wandering through it and like, man, just talking about how hard it is all the time. And there's no passion, there's no enthusiasm, but yet they're committed to this and they're not going to do something different, but they're miserable. I think that's where you got to get the passion, get the grit, or find something that you can have it about,
So not to end on a downer there. I mean, we'd probably dive into more of the practical side of this as well. The whole aspect of being able to relate to people, you mentioned on that theme of people are an essential part of success in business. If we can't get along with people, if we can't build relationships with people, we're going to fail. People give us insight into ideas. They challenge us to be better. Without that, I mean, introspection and reflection can only take us so far without a good friend like you are, be able to say, hey, what about this?
Yeah.
Or call us out on something. And we have to be able to listen. If we're perennially going through people as just sort of a resource and like, well, that guy's a disaster, and moving along to the next one, we're not going to really capture what we could have otherwise had.
Right. Yeah, I think if you have the passion and then like, get into people, it's like, because that's on everyone. And you go through just, in a business, you've got customers, vendors, just to start, like you have to be able to work with customers. Yeah. You got to work with vendors. You have to have good relationships. I mean, how many people do you know that have a bad reputation in the community, or you have one bad impression with them, you got unresolved conflict, you don't handle it right. Yeah. And then we say, never doing business with that guy again.
Yes.
And they're going to tell a friend. And your business can get sunk through one or a series of negative interactions with people. And
there are businesses that I will never do business with.
Right. And it's how they treated you.
Yes.
Because even if they make a mistake, if they treat you right in the process and make it right and, own it, take accountability,
that's a net positive.
That's a net positive. You're like, man, that shows their character. But a lot of times, if you don't have good people skills and maintaining relationships, you're going to struggle. I think too, we talked about customers and vendors. What about mentors? How have you leveraged mentors in your career?
Oh, well, there was a time I was too arrogant to have a mentor, to be quite honest. I wanted to prove that I could do something. And also there was an oversimplification of problems in that state.
Yeah.
I tend to look at all problems as being how hard could it be, as opposed to looking at other people that have been successful, been doing it for decades, and say, what do they have? What can I learn from that person? How do I not repeat their mistakes? How do I gain skill in this area from what they've already achieved? And I learned an incredible amount from having just a couple of people and they didn't even see themselves as mentors necessarily.
Yeah.
It was just more or less this relationship, back to that ability to just connect with people, the humility to ask questions and come and say, hey, what do you think of this? Or how do you do that? And it's surprising how much people will share when you ask.
Yeah. I think there's and I think some people might be like, well, do I formally ask them to be my mentor? A lot of times that's not how it's worked for me. I just get around people that know something I don't know, or they're further down the road. And a lot of times there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of time savings wrapped up in someone who's 10, 15, 20 years older than you, or in business longer than you have. And they might be younger than you. But if you can just ask questions, be humble, and learn from them, you can learn a lot from other people.
One of the things I had to learn as a part of that mentee process as well is not to look at a sort of vetting a mentor as somebody that has it all together.
Correct.
There aren't any perfect people.
Nobody does.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so if we dismiss somebody and we're looking for flaws and we say, well, that person had, you can look at somebody who's a fantastic salesperson and a horrible project manager and they run a business. And you say, well, what a disaster. Look, he has no idea what he's doing on project management. Yeah. And we dismiss that person instead of looking at the one skill that they really have and they're great at that we could learn from as a salesperson.
Yeah. Right.
And not, it's the old concept of eat the watermelon, spit out the seeds, kind of, where we don't dismiss people that we can learn from just because they have problems. Yeah, right. In a previous life, I used to travel a lot, and it was I was in and out of airports, You had a previous life?
Yeah. Pre-congenius, but it was, I kind of just got on, I was spending so much time in airports, and I'm like, man, it's a lot of waste of time, but I started kind of going on a mission. I was like, hey, I'm going to just strike up conversations with people, whether it was like on the plane, which I know some people hate that.
You were that annoying guy. Hey,
no, if people had headphones on, I'm like, they want to talk. But sometimes you just be like, ask one question, this is going nowhere. Right. It was crazy how many people I talked to where I just kind of went on a mission. I asked them 2 or 3 questions about what they did and who they were, and my mindset was like, everyone that I talk to knows more about something than I do. And if I can just sit and ask them, find what that one thing is in 1 or 2 questions, and then kind of just go down that trail with them. Well, how'd you get into that? How'd you learn about this? What would you tell yourself? And almost everybody does know more than you about something. And it might be something you don't find useful, like basket weaving or things like that. But, it's interesting. Like if you just get around people and ask them questions, you can learn a ton that will save you a lot of heartache and a lot of pain. And most people are actually very willing to work with you and talk with you on things.
And 5 minutes of the conversation might be pure nonsense to your ears, and there might be one nugget.
Yes.
I've had people that have been coaches and mentors, and they just rabble on. And I think I know that, and then there's one nugget I capture from that. It could be a game changer. Mm-hmm. And so we got to be prepared to listen and capture the data. And definitely that was a big part of learning for me is not being too critical.
Yeah. I think the other part of people, we talked about customers, vendors, mentors, and employees is a big one too. Yes. And if you have a big vision, if you say, hey, success to me equals, big numbers, big teams, then you've got to get really good at managing people. That's probably a whole nother episode to get into about what that looks like. But I think if you're going to be successul, you got to learn how to work with employees and how do you motivate and inspire and lead. And
I think you've had a great example of that, taking over a large team of people that were demotivated, churn out the roof. People are leaving left and right. You're rehiring or not rehiring. You're hiring to fill positions of people leaving. Yeah. How'd you turn it around?
It's a lot. But you start by figuring what do your employees need? What do they want? What would make a great workplace for them? And normally that list is really simple and it's not as complicated as you think. And it's not always money, but figuring out what people want, what type of leadership do they need and want, and then just go be that for them, and then solve simple problems. You can communicate you care by solving simple problems. I'll give a quick story. We were in that situation at hundreds of employees, and we're this all employee meeting. And there was this lady I'd met in the hallway, and she was kind of negative always. Like when you talk to you, like, how you doing? Well, I'm here, like one of those. And so out behind our building, there was a little smokers area. People would go out and, smoke. And I'm not a smoker, but for her, it was important. She was complaining to me one time. She was like, oh, they put these heaters out there in the winter time, but they mounted them too high so you couldn't actually feel the heat coming off of them. And so I went and found a contractor to lower those heaters. And that was a simple thing. And it cost us some money, but I realized that I'm not a smoker, but for people who do, that's their stress relief. That's their break. That's their time to recalibrate in the middle of the workday. And so for me, I'm like, hey, if that's an important space for them, let me lower those heaters and do some other things to make it a more pleasant atmosphere for them. Mm-hmm. Even though I'm not a smoker and I think it's kind of gross, no offense to smokers, but yeah.
There you go. Tick off half our audience.
Yeah, they're like, this guy, son of a gun. Yeah. But we were in this all employee meeting and like we were saying stuff and trying to make these commitments what we're going to go do. And that lady who was always negative and sour stood up and go, hey, I don't have a question for you guys, but I said to that guy that it was cold out there and he lowered those heaters. So when these guys say they care, they really mean it. And it was like one of those moments where I was like, holy smokes, just lowering the heaters and creating a better atmosphere there cost a couple $100 to do that. But in that moment, I turned a detractor into an advocate by simply caring about what they cared about.
Yeah. It's so good. So many examples of simple things that if we just cared enough to listen.
Yeah.
And ask for that feedback. Because sometimes people don't tell us unless we ask.
Yeah.
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 Why are you so grumpy today?
If your employees aren't, exactly. Why are you so mad? Because I'm cold. I'm like, okay, how can I fix that?
Right.
And it might just simple things like if you got a team, well, what are the things that are driving them nuts? And little things make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the employee side too, so many times we look at the performance side of things. We think about our vision and goals as accomplishing things. Mm-hmm. Our employees don't think that way.
No.
A lot of times it's just coming to work, wanting to get do their job without a lot of problems in getting their job done. So if you make that efficient, you enable them to succeed, they're happy. I mean, it's a raise.
Right. Yeah. I heard someone say once that the problem with is like a problem with leaders is they assume everyone else wants to be one. You know what I mean? Like, so we assume, well, what I want is what they want. And there's a lot of people who want nothing to do with leading or managing, and they don't really care about your vision for where you want to go. Their vision is I want to come work for you, get paid what you say you're going to pay me, and go home on time. Mm. And they've got, that's it. And so like, okay, that's their goal. How can I make that easier and better? Yeah. And if you serve your people always end up serving the vision.
And if you're winning along the way, that's icing on the cake.
Yep.
But it's not why people come to work.
Right. Yep. Set goals, make it fun. Find a way to incent people, and
it's beautiful.
It's doable and treat them right.
Yes.
All right. There's way more we get into there, but we talked about passion, talked about people. Let's just talk about just skills. And one is understanding your skills and like what are they. So if I'm starting my business, how would you encourage someone to evaluate just their personal skill level?
To be successful in business, you have to have something your business or yourself, if you're a one-man show, that you are good at or great at. One of the dangers, the temptations, is to really try to be everything to everybody. I've had to learn to say no to a lot of things people have asked me. Can you do this? Well, maybe, or I could. But if that's not the thing that our business focuses on, we just need to say no to it, because we can really distract our, that momentum, the ability to actually do great work by doing mediocre work in 10 different areas. So I think to be successful in business, you have to really focus on the things that you're good at. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's an element of that too, where if we're going back to the passion part of it, we want to do certain things.
Yep.
And there are other things that are just, things that we're just good at, but we don't want to do. So identifying, okay, yes, I really am passionate about this. And if I'm not good at it, how do I get good at it? Or how do I level up my team? Give an example of that. Contractor that I know is really has a lot of skills and grew up in an area where he works in a lot of different areas, electrical, plumbing, just whatever. If you ask him, what can you do? Everything. He'll tell you, I can do everything. And he found a niche where he can do window replacement, and he's really good at it. And he could scale a team around it, and he could focus in that one space, but he'd have to say no to all those other things, and it's very, very hard to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you identify your skill, I'm really great at this, I can build a business around that. It's one thing instead of 10 things. It's one thing I'm great at is instead of 10 things that I'm mediocre at. And you focus in that one space and you really crush it in that one space. That's a big element of success.
Yeah.
Back to our trim carpenter example with Dan and Chris. They both identified something that they were great at and they stuck with it. They had to say no to other things along the way. People have asked them, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? And they said no.
Yeah. Yeah. Knowing what you can be great at and getting after it. It's a big deal. And, and I think that's, we talk about like your reputation gets built on your work and being good at what you do, being consistent. But we've also like learned that part of what we do here is we work with contractors, and some are phenomenal at what they do, but their business processes are less than awesome because they don't like it.
Yeah.
Like we were talking to somebody who's like, yeah, estimating is like going to the dentist for me. I hate doing it, and it's like, well, that's what we do. But that's where, obviously our tool can help you with that, and our team will rally around you and help you get good at it. But realizing that just performing exceptional work is not enough.
Yeah.
There's a whole business management side of it. Can you kind of elaborate maybe just some high level things that, again, if someone's just getting started, that they should focus on from the business management side?
One of the things that really helped me in going from a one-man show, doing all the self-performing work and having the accolades that people would send my way and say, oh, he's really good at this. And it's tempting to do the things that, we love doing and just focus in that one space, but to realize that the business side of it is actually a skill and it's actually a job in and of itself.
Yeah.
And we need to block off time to do that. If you're not selling projects, if you're not estimating work, you're going to run out of it. Even if you have a backlog of people that want you to do things, if they're waiting for numbers from you, you're not going to close those jobs. And then you find yourself of kind of this friction, this kind of a start and stop, this very bumpy ride, or even so many other processes as well. We might find something we really are passionate about, want to do, and then there are a whole bunch of other things that we have to do.
Yeah.
So do we find somebody else to supplement that? Do we find an accountant to handle the financial side of things for us so we don't have that frustration? If that's not something you're good at or don't want to do, you need somebody else that can jump in there and fill that gap. Or maybe that's just blocking off time for it. If you are good at it, it's just saying, okay, one day a week I need to do my back office process. That's one strategy.
Yeah.
But there's definitely, as part of being successful in business, it's really making time and space to do the things that are necessary.
Right.
And that takes discipline too. A lot of times I just, and then also you have to recognize all the pressures and all the things, all the deadlines and all the faux kind of things people project on you. Hey, I want this done by Friday because that's their deadline. That's not necessarily your deadline.
Yeah.
You still have to run a successful business. And sometimes that means setting expectations and saying, can't do that.
Yeah. And it goes back to the people side and communication.
Yes.
Find a tactful, smart way of saying, I can't do that in a way that's, keeps your customer around.
Yeah.
So I think you've got the financial part, the sales part. And there's a lot of guys who are like, hey, I'm not a salesperson, but figuring out how do you get good at that? How do you get good at managing your finances? And if you can't, or don't, how do you get someone who will? Maybe you get a salesperson or a project manager, or maybe you should hire an accountant. Those sorts of things. Like if you if you're not going to get good at it, you absolutely have to find someone around you that can or will to help you be successful.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a big part of this whole process. It really kind of ties into the next point of just making this kind of taking inventory of where we're at as well. Of just being the practical side of this is saying, what am I particularly good at? What are the things that I love doing? And what are the things that I need to do but don't like doing? And how am I going to get those things done? And if it's a multi-person team, which I've worked on teams where, I'll give an example of that. Growing up, my dad's an architect builder, and many times we would be in the wrong roles. He'd be doing something that I was good at, and I'd be doing something he was better at. And just because that was just our role or our job description, we weren't in the right, we weren't collaborating to the best effect that we could. So sometimes we have to shift and have to pivot and say, recognize that somebody on our team is really good at something, even though that might be something we feel we should be doing.
Right.
And that takes some humility sometimes. Yeah. We've had those moments where I'm saying, hey, Drew, this is something you're awesome at, even though I want to do it. Yeah. I recognize you're better at it.
And the times you ask me to do things I stink at doing, you're like, that could have been better. Had I done it.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's an element of, we can be critical as business owners as well and judge people by our kind of theoretical standards as opposed to practically speaking what we should expect of somebody to be able to do as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, we talked through knowing those skills, knowing what's missing, and then just a real practical thing. We just talked about creating what are your processes, and I think your process and system and figuring out something that works for you. A simple thing is just, creating checklists for the things that have to be done. Because again, if you're going to own a business, you're going to wear a lot of different hats at the same time.
Yes.
And if you forget to put one of those hats on during the week, run payroll or, call a customer back, or those things that you meant to get to, but you just didn't do it because you didn't have good processes in place. Any thoughts on the value or importance of creating a checklist or process that you follow?
I had to do this with my business when I was building. We had the right roles. I had a project manager and a salesperson. We had an office manager. There was a team of craftsmen, but we were failing in process where somebody to show up to do work on a project and some, material wasn't there, or communication with a client wasn't there on a selection, and we were at this the feeling of disorder, and customers pick up on that very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
What the heck's going on over there?
Oh yeah.
And they judge very critically. And as soon as what happens once,
Mm-hmm.
they start thinking, well, okay, that's they kind of start paying attention more.
Right.
And then the second time, then they're just thinking, we got a problem.
Yeah.
Houston, we got a problem. So what we did to kind of try to turn that around was start building checklists. We did a lot of the same things over and over and over again. And my assumption was, well, listen, you fools, get it right. To my team,
Right.
Get it right instead of defining what the process should look like. What we gained from that and the momentum we had from a team and having a clear process, a clear checklist. If we're doing a kitchen remodel, we had a checklist of things that needed to happen.
Yeah.
Did the site visit happen? Did we capture these measurements? Did we communicate with our subcontractors on the dates? And did we communicate these selections? And we just built out the list.
Yeah.
And then it was mindless.
Yeah. And then it's like, if you're going to scale and keep standards, you have to have a process that you follow. Yeah. And I think too, some people overestimate their team's ability to follow the same process every time without instructions because it's intuitive and natural to you. But if you create an actual checklist that people do, you might feel like, well, that's micromanaging. Well, no, it's not really. It's maintaining a standard. And frankly, going back again to your employee who doesn't want to be leading. They don't want to be making big decisions. They don't want to be managing. They just want to do the work. Yeah. When you have clear expectations of here's the 8 things I do and I got to check them off the list, they, at the end of the day, feel like they're going home. They did it right. So,
they go home a winner. They feel like they were successful at their job because they checked off what needed to be done. Mm-hmm. And you have the confidence that they are winning too because they did what they were supposed to do. The other thing I love about this is as your business changes and as you perfect the processes, you have documents that point back to what you've tried, what worked, what didn't work, and you're not just kind of theorizing all the time where, we make, as business owners, we make rapid changes sometimes. We sometimes say let's try this out. And we don't communicate that to the rest of the team as thoroughly as it needs to be. Mm-hmm. When it's on paper, everyone sees the reason why behind it. They see how they're supposed to execute on that as opposed to just being like, oh, no, it's scary otherwise. Right. Change is scary.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And so I think it's the more you've got that stuff, then you're sleeping at night better because hey, in moments of clarity and strategy and thoughtfulness, you create those checklists. Mm-hmm. When you're focused, and then when you're in the middle of the chaos that is inevitably going to come to you on Tuesday afternoon, you still can go back to that. What did calm, thoughtful me say needed to get done this week? Yep. And then figure out how do I start knocking this stuff off the list so I can almost micromanage myself. Mm-hmm. In the moment, create a strategy point where you're like, hey, here's everything I need to do for it to be a good week. And then when chaotic you is running through and just running and gunning and the phone's ringing and you're driving and trying to figure out how all these things are going to happen, you can always go back and consult with the smarter version of you that was thoughtful in the moment, if that makes sense,
Yeah, and you can define these checklists in sort of say a pre-construction or a sales type of checklist where you're saying, okay, these are the things I need to do in order to sell a project. Yeah. And then you can reference back to that as well later and say, okay, yes, on that date we had this conversation with this person because people's memories are fallible. Yeah, our memories can sometimes think we had a conversation and not had one, or a customer might have thought we didn't have a conversation, we did. Yeah. So having a checklist and saying, yes, on this date we talked about this. So there's a log aspect of a checklist as well. Of yes, this did get done this time. It's a peace of mind. You sleep at night, where it's did that countertop get ordered? Yes, it did on this date this time because I have a checklist for that. So a sales checklist, you could have a selections checklist of, these are the things customers need to choose for their projects. And we need to choose a faucet and a toilet if you're doing a bathroom remodel, a shower, et cetera, and so on and so forth. And then you could have almost like a warranty type of checklist as well, like, a punch list type of checklist at the end of a project. Did these things get done? A wrap up. And even daily checklists. Yeah. Did the job get cleaned? Did we, power off our tools? Mm-hmm. The kinds of things that just happened that just seem so stupid. Yeah. To a customer or to us could have been prevented with the checklist. Give you a great example of that. We're working a job. This is probably 20 years ago. My brother and I are working on this bathroom remodel. And, it was probably a 4-week project. And great customers, all the rest of it. And we all pack up for the day. And we were trying to have a good process. We got the job all packed up, all tools all put away, cleaned up the thing. And my brother's responsible for, kind of the wind down part of it. And, so we got our sort of mental checklist. This happened, this. Yep, we're ready to go. And we're all ready to be out of that job at the end of the day. Nobody wants to hang around any longer to talk to anybody or do anything. And next day we show up. Customer says, we almost died of fright last night. We have this noisy compressor sitting in their bathroom, didn't get turned off. So 2 a.m, this thing kicks on. It's in their master bathroom, right next to their bedroom.
Right.
And, he wakes up in a, cold sweat, panic. She's pushing him out of bed. What? What's happening? There's just chaos ensues. And he's like, man, I almost died of a heart attack last night.
Yeah.
But, fortunately, they were able to look at us and say, they're young, and they didn't sue us or something. They were able to laugh it off. They didn't die, and they were able to laugh it off. But nonetheless, it was another. Things like that can cost you. They can cost relationships. They can cost money. And checklists can prevent that. I have so many examples of that, of just protecting high-end materials, countertops, cabinetry. I mean, just if you had a process like, okay, we're going to put ram board down on the floor. We're going to protect the faces of our cabinets. We're going to cover carpets, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You make sure it gets done.
When mistakes happen, you add one more thing to the checklist to make sure that doesn't happen again.
We learn from our mistakes.
Yeah. I think all those things help you, again, there's so much more we could get into, but we talked through kind of high level, just, do you have the passion? Can you work with the people? Do you have those skills? Just some of the practical how-tos. Critical. There's a lot more we can get into. And again, we touch on a lot of this different episodes. But one thing, we're running out of time here. One thing to wrap up, we had that question come in on book recommendations.
Oh, yes.
So again, people are, there's not a lot of new ideas out there. Most everything you want to learn on the subject sitting in a YouTube video, a book, or a podcast. And so hidden books, so if somebody wants to read, what would you recommend? The
7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. What I particularly like about that book is when you look at the things that make somebody successful, they're habitual.
Yes.
We can have a great week, and if we don't follow it up with habit, though, the following week, everything we did the previous one to be successful, the disciplines, the things that we did, don't count for anything.
Yeah.
So I love about these highly effective habits of just building those into our life and being like, okay, these disciplines are so important. What about you?
I'd co-sign in 7 Habits. It's an incredible book. It's long and it's really good. But each chapter,
audiobook is
it's awesome.
Yeah.
One that's impacted me a lot is called 4 Disciplines of Execution. And it's, or you'll see it called 4DX, like if you watch YouTube videos or whatever, they'll break it down. But really the concept there is figuring out, it's interesting, disciplines, habits, but it's for creating 4 disciplines in your business that'll help you achieve your wildly important goals. And so, and the underlying messages, there's tons of little things trying to take your time, your attention, their distractions, and all of them are things that can and should be done. But you've got to define for yourself, what are the wildly important things that have to happen?
Yeah.
Like if I know I do these 4 things today, then my results next month will be good. And a lot of times we end up chasing what the book calls lag metrics, which is what is in my bank account. Oh man, I got a problem because my bank account is low. And it's like, okay, well, what do you have to do to make sure that a month from now your bank account looks right? And so instead of sitting there refreshing your bank account or trying to collect on, payments or something, or take on a new job real quick to get this number up, it's saying, no, what are the lead things that if you do on a consistent basis every day, you'll be proactively solving that problem. So instead of looking back at what is your issue, you can say, hey, what can I do today? But it's a similar concept. What can I do today to make tomorrow happen? And so a lot of practical
Great
things
summary.
There.
Really good.
Yeah, don't even read the books now.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. And an audiobooks, great format for guys who are busy or don't like to read. I mean, the audiobook, great.
I'm big on just even YouTube book reviews. I've learned a lot from just, hey, YouTube and book summary for this.
I'm one of those guys that reads the first 2-3 chapters of a book and then get distracted by something.
The rest is all just talking in circles.
Yeah. Unless it's like 7 habits and you get 3 in, you're like, oh, what are the other 4?
No wonder I'm feeling I'm on doing 3 of the 7. Cool. All right, well, that's a wrap for this episode of the Contractor Commute. Thanks again for the comment, Easton. If you got questions, comments, feel free to leave comments on any of our channels, YouTube, podcast, social media. We check all that stuff on the regular. So appreciate you guys. Have a great day.
Yep.